Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what changed after the lockdowns, thoughts on my life changes. So life changed dramatically 3 years ago and it hasn't been normal ever since. The pandemic era lockdowns really did a number on all of us and we changed as a result of it. And personally, my life will never be the same as it was in 2019. Over the past 3 years, I've been thinking about how life has changed for me suddenly and what it will be like going forward. Because as we settle into the new normal, it's really critical for us to explore the impacts that the lockdowns had on all of us, and how it changed my life in both positive and negative ways. Through this video, it's important to me to process the lockdowns of my past and not cling to it. And through this, I can move on into the future and not dwell on what I lost prior to the pandemic. And also embrace the future with a more positive outlook. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my changes after the pandemic, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And let's do this. 3 years ago, normal life stopped for everyone, and it hasn't been the same ever since. The prevailing thought was that the pandemic was just going to last a couple of months and then we'd all be back to normal again. And my thought was that regardless of the time we all spent in lockdown, we'd eventually get back to our normal lives. Unfortunately, as the years gone by, I don't think we'll ever go back to normal the way it was back in 2019 ever again. People and their lifestyles have changed irrevocably over the past 3 years. And many people have changed forever due to the prolonged isolation of the lockdowns. In my life, I'm still dealing with the after effects of coming out of lockdown. And it's forced me to reflect on my life and the changes in my life because of the lockdown. Thinking through my lifestyle prior to the pandemic, I realized that it was very stressful and unsustainable in the long term for me. Mainly because I didn't know any other way to live my life as it currently stands. And because the lockdown forced everybody to shut down all at the same time, I finally got a glimpse of what the other side could have been. Things like career, friendships, and family has all been changed for me post-lockdown. And critically, a fundamental understanding of the world has been changed for me. I have a more deeper understanding of my place on this earth and the role I inhabit. Because at the end of the day, we only have one life to live and we must make the most out of that life. It has given me a renewed vigor to look to the future with optimism. Here are my thoughts on some of the changes after the pandemic. Number 1, disappearing friends. The most heartbreaking change that I had to endure after the pandemic is the loss of many friends and acquaintances in my life. I think that as the pandemic dragged on, we naturally got smaller and smaller social circles, and the people on the outer ends of our friendship bands just wilted away. And it was also hard to make connections with people that you see in person and you would not otherwise see elsewhere. And people also withdrew because of the pandemic. Not everyone I reached out to reached back to me. I had thought that once the world got back to normal, then people would naturally come out of their shells. But that hasn't been the case at all, even 3 years after the pandemic started. I lost around a third to half of my friends and acquaintances that I knew in 2019. The friendships that I had were tested based on isolation and due to varying beliefs in the pandemic. These friendship losses are definitely affecting me even to this day, especially since all these friendships were lost during a specific period of time within a short few years. And it's difficult to process each one of these losses because they're so numerous. But I do see it as a chance for me to get out there and find new friends to be with, and try to find people to build better connections with than before. So definitely one of the biggest changes coming after the pandemic is due to the loss of friendships in my life. It's something that I have to adjust to and make peace with in the future. Number 2, a forced break. Back in 2019, I was stressed and working really hard. I told myself that I really needed a break at some point in the future. This was because I had a lot of work stress, friends obligations, and an extensive traveling lifestyle. This means that I had a lot of demands on my time and I was constantly exhausted. But once the lockdown started, I basically had unlimited time to myself at home. Nothing was open and we couldn't travel anywhere, so this was a forced break for me. This break both had positive and negative aspects for my mental health. Looking at it positively, I was able to finally rest, relax, exercise, and play video games for as long as I want. And I could really take time and do things or just chill out or do nothing at all. But then as this lifestyle dragged on for months and then years, it slowly became monotonous to do. And it started taking its toll because once I got bored of everything, I started missing my friends and travel opportunities. My wife and I weren't able to escape our home and it really felt like a prison to us in year 2. This break, looking back on it now, gave me the perspective I needed to change my life. I was working way too hard prior to the pandemic and it was taking a toll on my body and mind. I was headed towards crashing my body sometime in my mid-30s if I kept it going. Now I look at my life and how I live it with more balance, and keeping in mind rest periods so that I don't burn out because of the high workload. Without that forced break, I don't think I would have given myself permission just to sit around and do nothing and relax. So on the other side of the pandemic, I think that I was ultimately glad that I was forced to take a break. Number 3, time is precious. On the other side of the lockdown, I gain a new appreciation for the fleeting nature of time. We are limited by time, and as we age, it gets harder and harder to do the things that we really want to do in life. My wife and I were in the prime of our lives before the lockdown, and we wanted to travel the world before we started a family. But because of the lockdowns, we spent those 2 years in our house rather than exploring the world. And ultimately, we lost that time to travel and have fun before our child. We really struggled and are struggling through the fact that we lost that time and freedom that we could have had. Although we did use that time to ultimately get to know each other better, we lamented the fact that we didn't explore the world. And so moving forward, we want to take the opportunity to explore the world whenever we can, and not waste the precious time that we have in this world, however long we have. This means that we have to plan things far in advance and make sure life doesn't pass us by, that we are ultimately active participants in our own journey of life. And I want to convey that to my son as well, so that he knows not to waste time in the future. So losing that precious time during the pandemic was absolutely painful for us. But it's given us a new appreciation of the time that we have left going forward. Number 4, loss of patience. As I have learned and relearned, I had much more patience going into the pandemic than afterwards. This has been felt for me the most at customer service issues, work-related issues, and relationship problems. I think that over time during the pandemic, I just got really short with the problems and issues in my life. And I think ultimately that the frustrations came from being locked down for so long. Because when I was at home, I had total control of everything that I needed to do and there wasn't a delay. But moving back into this normal lifestyle again, you have to depend on other people for life's things. And sometimes that might not go according to plan or on the timeline you expect it to be. Everything in the real world is much slower than having everything at your fingertips. And also, I think that customer service was on average faster and better prior to the pandemic than it is now. As much as I think I can try to better my patience going forward, I think that the recovery period will take a long time. Customer service issues, having a newborn, and elevated stress from work might all work to decrease my patience. And things that I would rely on to vent that stress aren't necessarily back to normal yet. Especially since most of the things that relaxed me were extensive travel and having fun with friends. All of which are harder to do with a newborn baby at home. Because at the end of the day, patience for others is much easier when there's no stressors in your life. So I do think I have to work on my ability to be more patient in the future, at least for my own sake. Because on the other side of the pandemic, if I don't work to get better at something, then I'll probably get worse at it over time. And number 5, finding importance. I think that one of the biggest things that I gained on the other side of the pandemic was a renewed sense of importance in my life goals. This period gave me the reset I needed to change up things in my life. Prior to the pandemic, I was living a life that I wanted based on an idea I had in college. This meant that I really had limited goals during that time, which is just to have a stable career and a spouse. But I had no idea of ultimately what I wanted for the next phase of my life. With the time off, I was able to really reflect on my life and what I needed from it in the future. And that was one of the primary reasons why I was okay with starting a family and continuing that journey. Because having a family ultimately means that I needed to take a step back from my own life goals. Because having a child takes a lot of time, and I couldn't commit to having self goals and having a child at the same time. I had to take a step back from all the individual accomplishments that I no longer wanted to obtain, and more consequently, be okay with not obtaining those goals. The pandemic period gave me the time I needed to be okay with my new reality, one in which I was prepared for family life and whatever that entails for me in the future. Getting a new job, having a kid, and moving to a bigger place were all on the timeline of things I wanted to do in my next phase of life. And those were not easy things to integrate into my life all at once at all. But because I was able to reprioritize the things that I want in my life, I was able to make it work. So the lockdown really gave me a perspective in my life that I was lacking. And I was ultimately able to channel that into my vision of the next phase of my life. So here are my general thoughts on the changes after the pandemic. The pandemic-era lockdown were by no means easy to go through, even with nothing to do, video games, and self-reflection. I had huge ups and downs in my mood, day to day, week to week, month to month, and ultimately year to year. And this was mainly because of what was externally happening to us at the time. But like with any experience that you go through, it's what you take away from it that's important, and ultimately makes you who you are after that experience. Even though I wish the pandemic never occurred, it did force me to make life decisions that I never thought I would. And I honestly don't think my life would have been on a better path had I not gone through the pandemic and had that self-reflection period. For example, I probably would have stayed at my own job, not started a YouTube channel, and focused on things that didn't matter in my life. At the end of the day, I really had time to reflect, pause, and ultimately take a break from my life at that time, and it benefited me greatly. because I took that time and reflected on what was really important in my life and focused on the things that I wanted to build for the future. That in itself has helped me to be a better person than I am before the pandemic. So those are some of the things that changed for me after the pandemic lockdowns. The long period that all of us were locked down has profoundly changed all of our lives. Some people definitely came out of that lockdown better than others, and it has fundamentally changed our society going forward in the future. Certainly for me, I still have a fair share of negative experiences from the lockdown that I'm still trying to process through. Specifically all the friends that I lost and the time that we could have done exploring the world and having fun. But in that darkness, there are definitely positives that I can take away from that pandemic lockdown. The lockdowns gave me a forced break in which I was able to use that period and self-reflect on all the things and focus in on the important things I want to do in the future of my life. At the end of the day, I can say that the pandemic lockdowns did ultimately improve my life overall. We each had our own unique experiences with the lockdowns, and I hope more people in the future can share those experiences. And we can all collectively grieve over what we lost during that period of time. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on what did you do during lockdowns and has it changed your life or not? And I'll see you next time.